Or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming in person and online. Today, we're happy to have Brian Van Doormaal from Lactanet Canada presenting for us. Brian Van Doormaal has dedicated his professional career of nearly 40 years involved in the genetic improvement of dairy cattle in Canada. Most significantly, he has been responsible for the development and delivery of genetic evaluation services since the creation of Canadian Dairy Network over 30 years ago, which has been a key part of the service portfolio of Lactanet Canada. Going. Sorry. So he led the research, development, and implementation in August of 2015 of the ProDollar as Canada's profit-based genetic selection index, as well as the modernized LPI and its sub-indexes in April of 2025. Since 2016, Brian has been the industry leader in the development and implementation of Dairy Trace as Canada's national dairy cattle traceability solution. In recognition of his significant contributions, Brian was awarded the Canadian Dairy Cattle Improvement Industry Distinction Award in 2023 and the ICAR President's Award in 2016. Thank you, Brian, for being here today. The floor is yours. I will share your
Star Factory mic on. Should be on. And do a little bit of theatrics. I always tell people if you're going to be a speaker in any audience, you have to demonstrate why you are authorized to speak on the subject matter. Well, this is my proof. I was an OAC 82 graduate from the University of Guelph. This is my leather jacket that I ported for 8 years while I was at the university, and I've always been proud to be an OAC 82 grad. This opportunity to speak has come to me in a very special way. Back in May, I announced to the team of geneticists at Lactanet that we're celebrating 30 years of CDN. And the day one when I started at CDN, and Colin said, "Cripes, I wasn't even born then." And he wasn't. So I started telling some stories about the years of the beginnings. And then he and Gabby started talking and saying, hey, maybe a seminar is in course here. So this is why I have this special and very unique opportunity to talk to you today. I promise there are no equations. There's no reference to scientific publications or anything. It's going to be fairly philosophical. And I titled my presentation, Let's Make a Deal, and I'm going to take my jacket off so I don't get too hot doing it. But keep in mind, I am authorized to speak on the subject. Let's make a deal. And I'm going to talk about a reflection on my career in our industry, our special dairy cattle industry in Canada. And I'm going to start, when you talk about reflecting on a career, you have to start at the very beginning. Top button. Which button is it? It's not working. Oh, there. I don't know if it was you or me, but I'll try it. There. Okay, now it's working. So this is my mom and dad. And my parents immigrated from the Netherlands a week after they got married in 1953. They took the boat, landed in Halifax, ended up on a train with a few dollars in their pocket to end up in the Ottawa area. So I was born and raised on our Holstein family farm in the south end of Ottawa near Canada, if you know where that is. I'm the middle child of 5. I have 3 brothers, and then finally mom and dad just kept trying until they had a girl, and so number 5 was my sister. And Well, maybe that's part of my characteristics and my personality is that I am a middle child. So if anybody's a middle child, you understand that you're always fighting for attention up or down in that family chain. Being born and raised on a family farm gave me an opportunity to really develop that interest and passion for the animals, the land, the weather, hard work, good work ethic. And basically my colleagues were my brothers and my sister, and my boss was my father. And that's a very unique environment to be working in, and it teaches you so much. And as a young person, your parents begin to responsibilize you very, very quickly, much more so than we do as me as a parent of my children. I didn't have the opportunity to responsibilize them in the same way as we do running equipment or handling animals or working on the farm. So it really, really taught me a very strong work ethic. And as I said a couple of weeks ago, I said my father, without me realizing it at the time, was really my first and most important mentor in my life, because I wanted to take over the family farm. But the real reason I wanted to take over the family farm, and it was nothing special, was I wanted to keep working next to my father. And I thought that would be what an opportunity. But mom and dad never were able to get an education in the Netherlands beyond grade 4 and grade 5. They were from poor farms. They were removed from the schooling by their parents, and they had no more than grade 4 and grade 5. I'm telling you, when they come to Canada and they have 5 children, they're going to make darn sure that all of us have a good education, because you do respond that way. What you don't have in life, you want to make sure your children do have in life. First life lesson, okay? And so honestly, they said, we're happy you want to come home to the farm. And my siblings didn't have any interest. I was the only one. And then they said, but before you stay, you're not staying on the farm. After high school, you got to go to university. You're going to go to Guelph and you're going to get a good degree. You need to be educated to be a farmer back in those 80s. And it's even worse now. Okay. So off I went, off to university. My grades were always good in high school. I had no problem getting in, and University of Guelph was the only place I applied to. It's the only ag program. But then in my 3rd year here at Guelph, that's when I ran into this individual that you may or may not know. His name is Ted Burnside, or Dr. Ted Burnside. And I met him in my 3rd year. And you know, all 3rd year livestock genetics or quantitative genetics course. At that time, it was taught by Ted and Larry. And after I took that course, he called me into his office in April, like some profs do sometimes. And they said, Brian, I see you did pretty well in that genetics course. And by the way, I see your grades are good in statistics too. Have you ever thought about doing a master's degree? I said, absolutely not. I never thought about that. I'm just going back to the farm. Don't even talk to me about it. But the reality in life is that he planted a seed in my head in the month of April, put a tap on my shoulder and says, I think you would be good to do a master's. I think you're good enough and qualified enough to do a master's degree, when I never thought anything of that. So planted this seed. I went home to the farm that summer, and all I did was drive tractors and work on the farm and bale hay and work with cows and stuff. Well, that seed grew into a nice plant that was perfect for harvesting in September again. When he called me back into his office, said, so what's your decision, Brian? And I said, well, I don't know. This is where my topic subject comes into play. I was thinking about this, and I was thinking back about that TV show that first aired in 1963. It's called Let's Make a Deal. When you're on that show, the player is offered something of big value and then given a choice of whether to keep what you know or exchange it for something that's behind one of these 3 curtains. And that's how I saw that opportunity with Ted. I knew what I wanted. I knew what I was going to go back to was the farm. But Ted planted a seed in my head about maybe a master's, which I knew nothing about. The reality is, on the show, once you pick a curtain, they reveal what the other curtains would have given you. But in real life, you pick a curtain and you go down that option, but you don't know what your alternatives that you left behind are. And you really don't have an opportunity to say, what if I didn't take that trip? What if I kept the original prize? So for you, I'm just starting this out by saying, we all in life can only see, we cannot see anything further than today in our lives. And that's true. Except now, I'm 66, I can look back on my life and see what it was. But reality, when we're going through life, you're presented with these opportunities of making a deal. You can decide who you're making that deal with, but the bottom line is you make deals. So back in 1981, I had these three curtains presented to me. Go home to the farm, like I had intended. Do a master's, which takes 2 years, no problem. And option 3 was, oh, I'll do the master's and then go back to the farm. So that's what I chose. I said to mom and dad, you wanted me to get an education. I got my 4-year degree, but all I'm going to do is 2 more years, mom, dad, and I'm just going to be a smarter farmer when I go back home. But I am coming. When I was doing my master's, Ted happened the September I started, he was off on sabbatical in Australia. That in itself is also random chance and things. So my supervisor was Dr. Larry Schaefer, and I'm sure everybody here at CGIL knows who he is. And this man was, to me, the best thing that could have happened in terms of leading my master's degree. Because you have to meet with your supervisor regularly and you learn from them and they set expectations and they guide you through all of these things. And he really helped me develop as a scientist. And I know you know all of Larry's successes in his career, but from our industry, I say, first of all, he developed MACE, which is used around the world by Interpol still years and years and years later. And almost every one of our genetic evaluation systems that are in place or were in place until Ted's retirement, Flavio, until his retirement and Yanush's contribution with him, were all developed by Ted. Really, everything. So he had a massive influence on what we do today in genetics. And he was an important mentor of mine as a professor to get me to think and to understand the science. And like most of you, I want to tell you, I spent all of those years down in the far corner of room 043 in the basement here. I know those cubicles. I know that office place environment. And I'm telling you, those years down in 043, as crappy as that room is, was the most flourishing, intellectually stimulating time of my life. As other colleagues of graduate students, we were going attending Larry's lectures or Jim Wilton's or Brian Kennedy's lectures, just like you are today with Flavio's. And sometimes you walk out and say, I didn't understand a thing. So maybe if we huddle around, maybe the 4 or 5 of us might help us decorticize a little bit what we were taught. Can we help each other better understand what we learned in that lecture? It was so good. It was such a great environment. And I really, really, really fed that passion for genetics that I started having as an undergrad. And that's why in the master's, it was just exceptional for me. So then I finished my master's and I finished it in '84. And then Ted comes to see me and he says, you know, like, you did pretty well on that. Maybe we could hire you to be a research associate. We got these services we got to deliver, and you're good at these things, and you got a passion. And he already had me lecturing a course the year before while I was in master's. I lectured half of a course. And I got that taste of lecturing and teaching students. He says, you could do that. Just stick around here and help the graduate students. It's kind of like a postdoc, except for me, it wasn't a postdoc. I was after master's. It's just a research associate position. But then that doesn't go much further. They say, if you're going to be here and do a research associate, why don't you do a PhD at the same time? So these were my 3 choices. Go home to the farm, be a research associate and lecturer, a research associate and a PhD, and I chose that last one. So yeah, starting in '84, I started my PhD. I was involved as a research positions. I did a lot of work and projects and things. It was really, really motivating for me. And I love that period as well. And my professor supervisor for my PhD was a gentleman named Dr. Brian Kennedy. Most of you would never have had a chance to meet him. He passed away from cancer in 1994. But he was part of the faculty here, and he was a really brilliant man and a real people-oriented kind of guy. He was exactly that balance, I would say, between Ted's personality and Larry's personality. He was a hybrid of those two and could bring everything together. And he was a scientist very interested in both the swine industry and the dairy. So he brought over two species as well and had graduate students in both. But one thing that Brian said to me is, hey, you did your undergrad here, you did your master's here, you're now doing your PhD here. You're not going to get away with that. You can't do 3 degrees at the University of Guelph. That's not going to be really helpful for your professional development. You need to find a way to spend some time away. And he was suggesting at least 6 months, but he would have even allowed me to be a year away. So I started carousing and we started talking about universities that I might go to. And I had chosen two to potentially, and one was Edinburgh and the other one was Wageningen. Wageningen, bringing back to my Dutch heritage, where I could have learned the Dutch language and lived in Netherlands with my family and cousins and relatives for up to a year. So I actually took a trip to go and visit those two universities, meet with the professors, and discuss the opportunity of doing part of my PhD program. I was halfway through my PhD. This was 1986. And the part that I had as a research associate was that I was involved in the actual calculation of Canadian industry type evaluations for type traits, conformation traits. That was a service that CGIL was providing for the industry. They were the actual calculation center for type traits. And it's because it was developed by Larry Schaefer that he built that system. And the University of Guelph, CGIL, was contracted by Holstein Canada to say, we need type evaluations. You guys have the expertise. So Holstein Canada was paying money to CGIL to deliver a service. So obviously it's not going to be Larry doing it all the time. So they had research associates doing it, and that was my role, was to calculate every 6 months, we were only twice a year, calculate type evaluations and deliver them to the industry. And that was really interesting too, because it got me into that industry delivery side, and it got me into the calculation side and application of methods and models that we learn in theory to be in practice and used by our industry. So that contract was accountable to the Holstein Canada Research Committee. So the research committee was comprised mainly of Holstein breeders, like elite breeders from around the industry. They were selected by Holstein Canada to be part of that research committee. But the committee was coordinated by Murray Hunt, and Murray Hunt at that time was the manager of breed improvement at Holstein Canada. So Murray, I hope you're on here today, but the kudos to you and your leadership too. He's a little bit older than me. He had done his master's a little ahead of me, but we overlapped many years over all of these decades. And so Murray was managing that committee. And of course, because I was calculating type evaluations and doing research, I had to give reports to the research committee. So they became exposed to me, and I became exposed to an industry committee. And then in 1986, I was invited by one of the members of that research committee to visit CIAQ. That's the largest artificial insemination center in Canada. At the time, it was responsible for almost half of all of the bulls in AI in Canada. And they said, you know, you're calculating all these type proofs, but have you ever come and visited an AI company? I said, no. So he says, I'll buy you a ticket. I'll pick you up in Montreal and we'll go and visit CIAQ. And so the minute I drove up to CIAQ, the front office, they had 2 massive bulls sitting out on the lawn, standing on the front lawn, ready for the day I was arriving. And it was actually a photographer, a livestock photographer, taking pictures of these 2 bulls. One being Hanover Hill Starbuck, and the other one, Roybrook Temple. And they're both born in late April. That's when my trip was on. This was a photo for them to celebrate their respective birthdays that were coming up a week later. And Starbuck was born in 79, and this was 1986. So he was just a proven sire, making CIAQ tons of money because they were selling semen around the world. Naively, as a young 26-year-old at that time, I was 26, naively, I never realized that his invitation for me to come to CIAQ was actually a job interview. We never asked questions like a job interview. He was just bringing me and touring me, talking with me, and I just never understood that. Never knew, and I was very naive at the time. So let's make a deal again. And in this time, my deal option of going home to the farm was rapidly fading as a realistic curtain for me to choose. I was halfway through a PhD. After you get a PhD, you're not going to return back to the farm. You know, so I was going to either become the director of genetics at CIAQ at 26 and join that executive team, or complete my PhD. Tough decision. I was already married at the time, so at least I had two people to help me make that decision. We already had one son born here in Guelph too. But I chose that one. I chose that one. And I have absolutely zero regrets about that one. But the reality is I never did get those three letters at the end of my name, the PhD letters, right? And so the point is that you are often given a tap on the shoulder. The manager of CIAQ is the one who said, I'm plucking you from your PhD program and I'm offering you this job in an unofficial, informal kind of interview that naively I didn't even know was going on. And so I'm offered this job opportunity, and it took a lot of guts, I have to say. These are not easy decisions because I didn't feel I qualified for that job. I really didn't. Like, all I ever did was work on the farm. And so I took that job, and the offer came from the general manager, Robert Chicoine. And as I show in the photo here, he was inducted into the Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame in 2005. Very, very big leader of our industry. But that job of director of genetics at CIAQ was the first full-time job I ever had off of the farm. I never had any others, and I could never believe that that opportunity came to me. And it's all because I took these choices and these decisions to start on the farm and pursue these opportunities that were being brought my way, but mainly and mostly because they were brought my way because someone was tapping on my shoulder to give me the confidence to take the step. That's the most important lesson. If you have someone tapping on your shoulder to tell you to do something more, that you have the capacity to go on, take those taps on the shoulder seriously. Because you don't see yourself, we don't see ourselves in the full capacity that we currently have. Sometimes outsiders see us in a greater strength and greater capacity than we see in ourselves. So trust in that as you go forward in life. The problem is, he slid that job offer across his table in his desk. I looked at the paper. I just skipped over the salary because, you know, a PhD, I was only making maybe 10 grand or something like that. So any job offer was better than that. But it's had a line in there and says, we're going to give you 6 weeks of private lessons at Berlitz School of Languages for you and your wife to learn French. Because I didn't speak a word. And so I said to them, well, okay, I understand why I need to learn French, but how come my wife? And that's where Robert steps in. He says, Brian, if there's one thing I've learned in life, and that is a man will never be happy unless his wife is happy. And your wife will never be happy in St. Hyacinthe unless she can speak the French language. Very smart man. And so we did. We took that bite and we jumped and we moved Curtis and the family and changed houses and everything, and we moved to St. Hyacinthe. I ended up joining that executive team, and I will admit that back then in 1986, there were extremely few master's or PhD students in genetics hired by the industry. Very, very few. This was kind of like new, that someone actually bring on someone with a master's degree, never mind a PhD. Today, our standards and our needs are a lot different. There's a lot of competition, and if you don't have a master's or PhD in the genetics field, there's little opportunity, to be realistic about it. So that gave me that opportunity that I realize now, and basically for me, I wanted to be able to either teach, but my passion was definitely to say, I want to have an applied role where I can understand the application of genetics having an impact in the industry and at the farm level. So I was a very applied person, and that opportunity gave me that. And that's what my wife and I spoke about at the time. And she says, let's go for this. And of course, that made it very official to mom and dad that I was never coming home to the farm. Most disappointing day in my parents' life, to be frank. And I am still conscious of that I made that choice. That was the best choice for me and my family, but it also had a negative impact because I didn't have any other siblings to take over the farm. So my dad continued to farm, hired some people, farmed for another 10 years or so. Not even, about 10 years, and then sold everything, like sold the cattle and stuff. But the teaching, I was reflecting on that when we had this offer, my wife, and I said, really, really, sweetheart, all I'm really doing is changing who my students are. Just because I'm not a faculty member or professor teaching in a classroom doesn't mean that I can't be taking the opportunity to teach farmers or industry people. And that's why for most of my entire career, I've passed this responsibility on, I used to write an extension article every single month of the year. At least 10 or 11 a year. I might have skipped one month in a year, maybe Christmas or something. But 10 or 11 articles for extension that got published in magazines, that got put on websites to try and teach people about genetics. So all I did was change my students. That's the way I look at it for the rest of my career, and that's why I have no regrets about that opportunity. But 1995, there was another, let's make a deal. And there I obviously said, okay, well, here's go home to the farm, that's gone. I could stay at CIQ and I could accept an offer. So when CDM was created in 1995, there was a job posting out there. And my boss at that time, Robert Chicoine, he sat me down and says, Brian, you have a career here at CIQ. You can stay. You will be successful here. We'll keep you. You'll be promoted. You'll have a path here at CIQ. No question. But he says, I want you to look at that job over there. That job over there at CDN, you'll have a national opportunity and a national impact, whereas here at CIQ, you're going to have a provincial opportunity, provincial impact. As my boss, as my manager at that time, he actually encouraged me to leave that company to go somewhere else. What leadership? What vision? And that's, again, a tap on the shoulder. I mean, this company hadn't even existed yet. It wasn't even on paper. I never saw myself in an opportunity to actually take on that type of responsibility, to start something. Well, that year I would have been 34, something like that. 36, I guess the other way. But the point is that I was still relatively young. I had some executive experience at CIQ, but I didn't know how to start a company. I didn't know how to report directly to a board and all those other things. But because Robert he invested his confidence in me, I said, okay, if you think I can do this, I'm going to throw in my application. And in the end, I ended up being offered the job. And of course, in the end, I accepted that job, as you know. And so then CDN was created in May of 1995. But reality, what happened is that it was created because the federal government forced us. forced our hand. Federal government said, we're no longer doing genetic evaluations for any livestock species. We're going to privatize it. Every sector needs to find a solution. So as a dairy industry, we need to huddle around and say, what are we going to do here? We need to find an answer. So they appointed a committee of people. They were called the Futures Group, actually. And there were 2 people from the AI sector, breed sector, and the milk recording sector. And those 6 people formulated a plan to actually think about creating a company that they decided the name would be Canadian Dairy Network. And that's when the job posting was out. And this was me with my first board of directors in 1995. And me with another great gentleman, Gordon Suter. Gordon Suter was the first chairman of the board. He was the general manager of the AI company in British Columbia, BC AI. He was the inaugural chair, and he also was eventually inducted into the Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame in 2004. And it was actually Dairy Farmers of Canada that was our government relations body and our voice on the other, and they are strong negotiators. So it was actually DFC that negotiated with the federal government about how much money we were going to be paid to take over their responsibilities, right? So we did get good money to start CDN and get it going, but we had only 3 years of funding, and we needed to find a way that make sure that the industry was able to take over full funding of CDN in year 4. So in the very beginning, we didn't even know where to locate it. We had no office. We had just filed incorporation papers, which were successful on May 29, 1995. I was already the general manager, but I didn't have a company that I was the manager of. So we agreed that CIAQ would continue to pay my salary, and once CDN was established, CDN would pay CIAQ back for the salary that I was earning from them with benefits and everything like that, right? We found a solution. We needed a multi-year business plan with a proposed organizational chart about how many people we were going to need, how many geneticists, how we were going to do all of this, and then obviously a budget. I had to work on all of those things, and I was learning. I was growing and learning at the same time about building all of these things. We didn't have a bank account. There was no money coming in. So we ended up as a board choosing that Guelph would be the location of the CDN office after I had prepared an assessment document of 4 different cities in Canada. Guelph was one of the other 4, well, one of the 4, and the vote became 5-4 in favor of Guelph, but the driving force was because therefore it would be close to the University of Guelph. And now you look at the 30 years of CDN and the bond and the relationship and the value the University of Guelph has given to CDN and Lactanet and the success of the industry. I don't want you to minimize the value of that decision to have us in Guelph and actually work always and continually close to the people here, the graduate students, the faculty, all of the research pot, everything. It's so valuable to everybody, a mutual successful formula for sure. And basically, once I established that I was going to have an office in the Ontario DHI building, I started using them for HR, and I started using their staff for finance. I didn't have my own people for that, so I contracted time from other people. And then we opened up a bank account downtown Guelph, and I went to the 3 partners, AI, Breeds, and Milk Recording. I said, how about each of you give me $100,000 so I can open up a bank account and put $300,000 in. Then I have money, and now I can start hiring people, and I can start paying salaries. And I'll give you back the $100,000 whenever it comes back to me. No interest, of course. And so they all did. They all wrote me a check. The same day I asked, I got 3 checks and I deposited into a bank account downtown. We needed it to make it happen, right? The biggest questions that we had was that we really didn't have any formula for industry funding. While it starts off $100,000 from each, that wasn't going to be how it happened to be in the longer term. We needed to sit around a table and all negotiate and strategize and work together and as an industry find a solution. And we were basically looking at this, one of the core principles is that It's fine for some companies to give cash, but we also have to recognize that companies will give data, and data has value just like cash does. So we have to find that balance between how much money do companies give versus how much data do companies give and not charge for. So we ended up, after 30 years, the same formula is in place. Our DHI sector of Canada gives all of the data into the genetics database free of charge. Collect all of that data, and it just, as a byproduct of offering herd management services, that data gets used for genetic evaluations. But the funds that we get come from the AI sector and the breeds, and 80% funds, 80% of the funding of CDN comes from the AI sector. And it's all based on market share. So as CMEX's market share goes up or down in time, they pay more of that 80%. Or as other companies enter the marketplace, they start entering and start paying a percentage. And the breed associations too, except already about 20 years ago now, the breed associations established a cooperation, a collaborative agreement that Holstein Canada would actually provide services to the breeds, but also pay all of the CDN fees, no matter what they were into the future. But they still pay the 20%. So that formula has worked for 30 years and has been very equitable for everybody. Because honestly, if I say our budget is, let's say it's $2 million roughly, and 80% is 1.6 million, we export $200 million worth of Canadian genetics. And we're costing the industry 1.6 million to get genetic information out there. What multiplier is that, right? So there is a good value in what we're delivering because genetics, Canadian genetics, is marketing internationally and makes huge international sales. Never mind about the domestic sales. So also my first 3 hires here was the team in 1996. I had first hired 3 geneticists, Gerald Jansen and his wife Paula Rossi, and then Zenting Liu, who's been at VIT now in Germany for many, many years, but he was one of our first geneticists as well. And me in the middle, and my IT team was Dan Hulk and Sherry Quayle, and they came from the milk recording sector, and I brought them in as IT experts. And you'll see Murray Hunt, and this is his dear wife, Karen Hunt. And they were both employed by CAAB, which is a regroupment of the AI sector. And we said, hey, they were the only 2 employees of CAAB, so why don't you come into our office and we'll collaborate together, we'll work together. And so Murray and Karen and myself and our team, we acted as if we were one team, but they were paid by the AI sector and we were paid through the CDN budget. But we've always been very close that way, and that relationship in terms of making the industry appreciate the value of the services we were providing was outstanding and start from the beginning. This slide says, sometimes you get curves in the road of life. And this was my wedding photo in 1983. And I can say life can be very, very great. And I had a great job. I was very happily married. We had a beautiful family. These are my 3 kids when they were young. Aren't they adorable, eh? But there are curves in the road, and my wife was diagnosed with cancer in 94, and we thought we had a beat by 95, and that's why I threw in the application to go to CDN and was offered the job to go to CDN. We thought that was past us, but it came back later that same year, and then she tried to fight it for another year, and I lost her in December of 96. So this month here is coming up to 29 years that she passed away. My children were 7, 9, and 11 at the time, and I found myself to be the general manager of a company that was 1.5 years old, without a wife to help me support my children and help me in that way. And I found that that's where the community and everybody found a way to help me get through that challenging time. But the most important person was the chairman of my board of directors, Gordon Suter, who showed me compassion, showed me caring, showed me the importance of personal life and good health and the fragility of life compared to dedicating your life to work. And I have to say that he was also, over those years, especially another third mentor of mine. And Gordy passed away already a few years ago now himself, but I always think of him. And I really do believe that he motivated me, or he taught me to be a different kind of manager, one with compassion, one caring about people, one knowing the staff, and to have like friendship kind of colleague relationships with them, not the boss versus the rest relationship. Yet I also understand that there are times in an employment or workplace environment that if I was the responsible person, sometimes authority needs to come down and decisions need to be respected. So there is that balance between those things about how you have your colleagues and your work relationships. And then, of course, it's always this life-work balance, and I've always encouraged my team all over those years to find that work balance. It's so important. You're so much happier if you're finding a proper work balance, work-life balance. So the Genetic Evaluation Board, I was introduced saying it's been all my life, and that's true. And here is an original picture of one of the first. It's called the Canadian Milk Recording Board, and as part of the subcommittee of that was the Genetic Evaluation Board established by the government in 1975. And this is Murray Hunt right here. And David Clemens was the manager of Holstein Canada. Wayne Dickinson, you see him on the open industry sessions. He's the one commenting a lot. He was a member there. A few other, here's Robert Chicoine in the back. He was my boss. This Roy Snyder was an older gentleman in the AI industry. Brian Kennedy, he was at McGill still, then McDonald campus back then still, before he came to Guelph. And Wes Lane worked at Dairy Farmers of Ontario. And of course, way over here is the first Genetic Evaluation Board under CDN. And you can see Larry there, and this is Pierre Liberté and Gerald Jensen, Herman de Boer. Jack Deckers was just a speaker here not long ago, myself, Jay Shannon, Kevin Wade, he's been at McGill and he's part of the Lacta board. And this was also a breeder that we had on the board. We would know him very well. Then we started 10 years at CDN, and basically this was 2005, and that's when Doug Blair was part of my board. But he was the creator of Alta Genetics, and he became elected as the CDN board chair. And he was also a visionary mentor, and his talent was to identify people that had potential and just invest in them, just make them grow, help them grow. And this was just a natural talent he had as a CEO, and he grew so many people in that vein, and he helped me be one of those two. And when I was the general manager of CDN, and he was the chairman of the board, he's the one who told me, I'm going to send you, our board is going to send you away to Queen's University to get an executive MBA. I want you to leave the company, leave everything behind, just go for a month over to Queen's and get this executive MBA. You're already 9 years here at CDN, they said. You're not going anywhere. Well, you might leave CDN if you had a different industry, but you're not leaving our industry. So we feel investing in you now as a person will be an investment in the leadership, your leadership skills to our industry for the rest of your career. That's, again, a man with vision. And I feel, and Gordy, and Doug is the third person on my mentorship list that was also inducted into the Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame. So I have been very fortunate and blessed to be surrounded by these people that are so strong and visionary and influence. And this photo was taken with me and Doug just a few weeks ago at a retirement gathering that LactaNet organized for me in Toronto. So the arrival of genomics, this also hit us hard. And as a geneticist team, it took incredible board vision. By the way up here, this young guy up here, that happens to be Murray Hunt's son. And he's a CEO of Alta Genetics, Urus and things. So Murray Hunt's son became part of the board of directors of CDN eventually in his life. And this is the team back in 2008. You see Garrett and Pete Filippo, Janusz, and you know the others as well. Jamie is there. that are currently in place. But really, while the board vision was extremely important, I always wanted to credit the talent of the team. That team commitment to switch gears rapidly, drop everything we were doing, and say we'll only have one focus for the next year. And that focus is to be amongst the first in the world to have genomic evaluations for Canada. And that's all we did. We worked on one project as a team, led by Garrett, very true. And as a geneticist, like remember, I had finished my studies in '86, and we take all of this quantitative genetic stuff, and then I'm doing progeny proving systems and genetic evaluations, but never once did I ever think that one day in my life we would actually be looking at an animal's DNA to estimate its genetic potential. That's what genomics has given us that we never ever thought it would happen in our lifetime. So it was an incredibly stimulating time. About halfway through my career, we get all of this opportunity at CDM. We had all of this opportunity to actually use DNA. And we were the second in the world to actually introduce genomic evaluations. Then there came the time where we were doing a merger with Holstein Canada in 2010. Again, it was great vision, but there was a suboptimal motivation or not ideal reasoning or motivation to doing this, and the timing was terrible. So it failed. Within 2 years, it failed. I'm not going to get into all the details, but it just was a really good idea at the wrong time and therefore failed. My message is that not all good things work out. Not all those things that we think are great ideas or great opportunities are always going to work out. That's okay too. The bottom line is that we have to learn, and we do learn from those opportunities, even if they don't give us the expected outcomes that we were thinking of ahead of time. And the big opportunities do require very visionary people at the right time. And I will say on the second bullet, we learned that opportunities don't give us the result that was the expected outcome. It turns out that CDM wasn't merged with Holstein Canada, but that is where I met Karen, my current wife. So I ended up with a totally different outcome, didn't I? Yes. So this is 20 years with the team, with the board and the team, and you see some of the same people involved. And I just going through a little bit of the photos of the history and the team. And I always want to say that you're talking about my career changes and my opportunities, but the reality is that all of this was done by a group of people. And when you surround yourself, whatever role you have, whether you're the manager or just part of a team, find a way to surround yourself with people that are really good people. And you all become successful. You feed off each other, you help each other. And I think that in itself is an outstanding life lesson. We ended up creating the LactaNet partnership, and basically, we were thinking at that time, to stand still is to fall behind. We could not just stay the way we were. Things were changing with genomics, and we really needed to adapt to that scenario. And so many people say phenotype is king. And it is true, phenotype is important. But king and the best positioning are those organizations that have phenotypes and genotypes. And by the creation of LactaNet, we took all of the phenotypes collected by DHI and all of our industry partners and the genotypes that we had at CDN, and we made one entity that had phenotypes and genotypes. That's higher than a king, and I don't know what's higher than a king. And now we celebrated 30 years back in May, and yeah, we're a happy group. All excited, and the team has expanded to also include a portfolio of dairy cattle traceability, and I'm happy to have been involved with that, but that responsibility in my life and my development didn't trace back necessarily to being at Guelph here, but again, it was another opportunity, and I said, why the heck am I getting involved with traceability? I'm a geneticist. But then I thought, well, DNA can have an impact on traceability, but maybe one day it'll work. So these were the deliverables over 30 years that I look back on, and I say, all of these things ended up coming from almost all of them came from some relationship with the University of Guelph and CGIL in terms of the research that went behind it to get us into certain places. Essentially every one of those systems. Practical exceptions might have been the overall indexes like the ProDollar and our modernized LPI and moving to monthly female evaluations. Those are more delivery kind of things. But introduction of new traits, I know that CGIL and the faculty and the graduate students have always had an important role in the success of CDN, Lactanet, and the Canadian dairy cattle industry. And right now, you don't see that you have that influence, you have that opportunity, and you have that contribution that you might not see for many years. So the other deliverable was our website, and we have always had a very popular website at CDN and now Lactanet Genetics, and it does many things, and it's very popular around the world. And so we are seen as a world-class organization and a delivery of genetic services. And as you probably all know, just this past Tuesday, we reached 100 official, what we call proof days, starting in 1996 and going till 2025. And I know 30 years times 3 doesn't calculate to be 100, but there was a time frame where we were doing 4 evaluations in a year and another early start where we only did 2. But rest assured, you can trust my calculation ability that I did count to 100 properly. This is my slide for here, CDN, Lactanet, and CGIL. That's been a winning formula. It's been a winning formula in the past, and in the present, and in the future. There's no question in my mind. CGIL began with exceptional scientists that was co-founded by Ted Burnside and Jim Wilton, and then led from them with contributions and the ability to attract Larry Schaefer and Brian Kennedy, who had the influence on me, but many others. Charles Henderson and many, many other people came to Guelph to have that opportunity to be exposed to the CGIL leadership team. When you have strong faculty, you attract strong students. And that's what you are. You're attracted here because of the ability for us to deliver a really good quality environment and education. And I end up saying great students end up with major opportunities in their area of choice. And you don't have to choose genetics. You're studying this area. That's not the point here. The point is that you're committed to something, you see opportunities, you take advantage of them, and if you use these opportunities in the future in a different direction, it's okay that it takes a right turn or a left turn. It's okay. And that's all part of what I'm trying to say here today. And these 3 people are surely very important for the success of CGIL in the recent years. So why do I retire? Why am I retiring now? Yes, young lady in the back. It's basically, for me, it's to pay it forward. My number 1 reason. I'm thinking, and I've told you my story, that at 26, someone said to me, I want you to leave your PhD and I want you to be director of genetics of the largest AI company in Canada. I said, holy cow, like why? And they had confidence and faith in me. And now I'm 66 and I'm saying, I have faith and confidence in the people that are around me. And every day longer, or every month or year longer that I stay in the role that I have, I'm depriving somebody else of that next generation of having that leadership role. And so, yes, Cindy joined the team 2 years ago, roughly, had a maternity leave in between. That's okay. She's also a PhD grad here from CGIL, an outstanding young lady, a mother of 3. Her husband's a farmer with 2 robots in the barn. And they manage everything at home, and they live near St. Hyacinthe in Quebec. She's fully bilingual, did an MBA as well while on maternity leave. She's an outstanding young lady, and I have full confidence. And now Lactanet has decided that she would be the person to take over all of my responsibilities at Lactanet and join that executive team at Lactanet. And of course, Allison's had the role for a year and a half or so, almost 2 years of now managing our genetic evaluation services and our team. And Allison is also a grad from here and that has been developing in those life skills that she's learned from here. The rest of the team, I think right now, everybody comes from Guelph, right, Colin? And everybody, I think everybody is a Guelph grad on our genetics team right here today. It's not always been the case, not exclusive. I do try to hire the best, but that's true. And I put this picture in the bottom because I also have to acknowledge that Melissa Lalonde is an outstanding individual that's leading the Dairy Trace, the traceability program that I brought on about 2 years ago as well. And so that gives me a sense of confidence that I can step away, pass the baton on, and not need to worry. I'm paying it forward. That's my first and foremost motivation. My second one is, well, I love my family. And this is my dear wife and Karen, and we love to play pool and we love doing many things together. And she's been very supportive. And I also have to say very understanding, because it's not always easy to be the wife of someone managing a company and all kinds of responsibilities and working ridiculous hours. A very cherished person that I love dearly. We've been together now for 13 years after I left Holstein, Canada. I reassure you of that. These are my 3 children now as big people. Not just big people, but parents. And so we have 8 grandchildren. I wasn't sure whether I was going to be able to say 8 or 9 because the 9th is due on Monday. So my son and his wife in Vancouver, we're just waiting for that other baby girl to come around. So it'll be number 9. My mom is still with me. She's at 98. She still lives alone in the big farmhouse. It's a newer, modern farmhouse, I will admit, not the old one. But she got her driver's license 3 weeks ago, and she's driving again, and always been driving, so can still drive in a full capacity, both mental, physically, and every other way. Lots of discussions with mom. And then, of course, Karen has her 2 boys, and they're an important part of our family as well. So family to me is extremely important, and they've always been. People who know me well know that I cherish my family, and I want them to cherish their family. And I think just now it's time for me to dedicate a little bit more of my time that way. So it's easy for me now to look back in that rearview mirror and look back at life. It's easy. It's hard for you. But it's much easier when you're old, and that's why I said a few weeks ago, I said, now I understand why so many old people tend to write autobiographies, because you can look back at your life so much easier. I also understand why mom talks about her life so much. When she's 98, she says, I don't have much left to go compared to the years I have behind. But I look at myself and I say, I'm 66. If mom is 98, I got another third of my life left. That's the way I do the math. So I'm looking forward to that third of my life with my wife, Karen, and our children and our grandchildren together. My closing comment is, life is like a box of chocolates, and you never know what you're going to get. And I love chocolates, but I love the saying. And the point is that, try things out, take advantage of opportunities, and especially if someone is tapping you on the shoulder, give that serious consideration, because you don't always see what your potential is compared to what other people see in you. Thank you for your attention, and I may have gone over time. I have no idea what time it is, but I'm willing to have discussion, comments, questions, or stick around after for more coffee. And there's lots of great cookies made by Gabby's mom, so they're very good cookies. Thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian, for that great presentation. It is 2:30 now, but I will give the opportunity for anybody online to ask any questions. Those of you in the room, we do have some time, so you can have a chance to talk to Brian after the seminar, but I'll just give the online group their time. So if anybody online has any questions, please raise your hand or put it in the chat. Okay. If anybody in the room has a question, just to finish it off, that's fine too, or we can, okay, Colin, go ahead.
Ask you a quick one, Brian. I know you concentrated on kind of the pathway over the last 30 years, but just from all of your experience, where do you see the next 10 years of the industry going and what your perspectives are on it?
So that's a very good question, Colin, and I do have ideas about what has to happen in the next 10 years. The first is how we all work as an industry. And I know this is more of a research side, but there is an industry out there, and the industry is shrinking in terms of number of farms. And on those farms, there's a growing number of cows, but also a growing adoption of technology. And as an industry, we need to change. We need to embrace that and try to find a way to deliver services, acknowledging that that generation of farmers is going to be embracing that. So I think we really need a radical shift in how we are serving customers that are farmers, receiving services that are so engaged in technology. And I think we're still too much of the older way. Like I talk about PDF reports and stuff like that, right? There have to be different ways that people look at things or absorb information or take knowledge from our services, not just genetics, but as an industry together. And I also think that that means that there can be a better structuring of our industry so that we're not just each trying to attract customers to our own entity or to our own app or to our own website. They should be able to find information easily from anybody and not be any form of competitive environment. And I'm not saying there's a lot of competition out there, but we do protect each other's turf. And I think there's still opportunity for more harmonization or of how we deliver and the front service, the way farmers see us as an industry. On the other side, I also feel that as a dairy industry for years and years, all the time, it's been forever, the dairy industry has been very segregated and separated from the beef industry. And that should no longer be the case. With the beef on dairy use being over a third of our inseminations, we can't even provide good information to dairy farmers about the bulls they're using that are beef bulls, but even about how to market those calves that are crossbreds or collect data on those calves to have a feedback mechanism to them. I really do think that over the next 5 to 10 years, we need to build a system with the beef industry that's probably more of a national data collection system together, instead of saying, no, we're dairy and you're beef and we shouldn't talk to each other. So I do think that's a change coming down the road as well.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just for the time here, I'm going to stop the questions, but thank you everybody online for coming and everybody in person as well. And thank you, Brian, of course, for this presentation.
Thank you, Gabby.
And there's some nice notes in the chat for you, but thank you everybody, and we'll get to ending this and starting with the treats and our discussion with Brian. So.
Great. Thank you.